And in the first two, we had a lot of submissions, especially in the first one, from folks who were very established in, automated legal reasoning and symbolic reasoning and classical AI, those sorts of approaches to law. And then last year, there were a lot of papers. That really leveraged constraint satisfaction, applied them to things like regulations. And we saw quite a few papers that used answer set programming. It was really having a moment last year. This year, there weren't quite as many techniques that were prevalent, but the topics were broadly, we saw like tax law and LLMs, and we had this talk on privacy. Um, so we had a little bit of consistency in those topics. And that leads us to the present of ProLaLa. And one of the things I wanted to highlight were two big differences from prior years. So the first was that the structure of this session and the goals were a bit different. And so in the past, we had mini conferences, and mini conferences in computing, for those of you who aren't in computing, these are equivalent, the conference publications are equivalent to journal publications. Oh, apparently you can't see the slides changing. Interesting. Maybe if I share and unshare.
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to not put this in presenter mode and just do this kind of the old-fashioned way. Um, so, can folks hear me? Can I get a confirmation that you can hear and see the slide that says present of ProLaLa? Great, thank you. Um, so, as I was saying, this year, one of the big differences we had was in the structure of the conference. So, typically in computer science, we publish in conferences. What we call conferences produce the equivalent in other fields of journal publications. Now, a lot of our conferences actually do produce journal publications. We have a more journal like review process, but they're very formal and serious. I mean, they don't have to be serious, but they're very formal nonetheless. And this year we wanted to go for a little bit more of a workshop feel rather than a mini conference feel. And one thing that the co-chairs we all discussed was this idea of really trying to use this as an opportunity to focus on misconceptions and bridging divides. And so I hope that we were able to do that. Please give us feedback. You'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey at the end of this. But the other big difference we had this year were some challenges in recruiting and advertising. And so we would definitely like to hear back from you about this. The first was we were concerned that we maybe had trouble reaching people because we think, or when we think some of the reasons were things like potential fragmentation in the information ecosystems we're part of now. Not everybody's on Twitter anymore. A lot of people are on Mastodon, and you don't always get the same information flow because it's not as centralized. People are like a lot of mailing lists have changed. A lot of people have moved institutions in the past couple of years who have participated in these programs. And so it's been kind of difficult to keep track of who all is interested and get the word out. The other thing is that the timeline for submissions has changed from past years because of the move from Popple to Uppsala. And so it, excuse me, it fell during a end of semester break, and that may have contributed to, a lack of dissemination throughout the community. The other question we had was whether or not we have reached a point of saturation amongst those who are working at this specific intersection. And this could be the case because it is a relatively small community. The PL community within computing is not particularly large, and so having a PL plus law group, especially in relation to data-driven legal informatics, could mean that we're just a much smaller group. And it could also be possible that we're perhaps too disparate across law. So even if you have a consistent group of people who are in PL who are interested in legal applications, appealing to people who have expertise, specific legal specialties, might be a little bit difficult to get that word out. Um, and so those are some thoughts we had and would love to hear back from you regarding some of this. Um, this year, one of the things we wanted to highlight was this new type of submission activity, so submission type, which is structured activities. So there's a lot of excitement when we were sort of chatting with folks in the ProLaLa community about this. The bad news is that we only had one submission of this type, and there wasn't anything outside of the call for participation prompts. But the good news was that prompting works. So if you put some ideas out there to get people to start talking, they're like, "Hey, I actually have something to say on this." And so we really want to take this as a launch pad in today's social activities to try to get all of you to think about what would help benefit will help inspire your a future submission for ProLaLa 2025 of this type. So we think there's still a lot of possibility there. Again, we'd love to hear from you about that. And speaking of ProLaLa 2025, it will be held again at UPSLA in Singapore. And so the topics, it's up to you. Please submit or consider submitting. We are seeking 2 new co-chairs, preferably one of each from law and policy or programming languages, software engineering, or formal methods. The idea is to have 2-year overlapping terms. So James and I will be staying on to help guide and help the new chairs. But the way that this process works is 2 new people would come on and we would sort of hand off to them for a bit. We've also been discussing some suggestions for what to do with this particular conference moving forward. And so one idea is to start working a little bit more closely with CRCL and having things like invited talks from already published articles or having unpublished presentations on partial work to get some feedback and provide a pathway to journal publication. Um, I would also encourage folks, for example, at dinner tonight to discuss possibilities of other activities like hosting a dog stool or creating a new mailing list or even something like a blog or I don't know if people do vlogs anymore, podcasts, not postcast, podcasts, that sort of thing. Is there something that would benefit the community that would give a platform for people to have the kinds of conversations that we're hoping to have? So let us know what you think. There's this Google form that's open. The QR code there should lead you to it. There shouldn't be any kind of blockades on that. If there are, if you have any issues accessing it, please message me directly or post in. I guess there's not a dedicated session in the section in the ProLaLa channel Q&A. But I think you can actually apparently you can create a post as long as you have both a topic and content. So I will turn it to the room. Are there any outstanding questions?
Hello, Emma, can you hear us?
Okay, right. For planning ahead for 2025, I want to point out that UPSLA and ICFP are co-located next year, and they're happening in the same week. So I think this is a great opportunity. You could double the number of attendees, but it also raises some constraints. So you might want to reach out to the organizers of similar workshops or events and see if you can combine ProLaLa with something else. Because whatever it is, it's likely to overlap with UPSLA main track or ICFP main track. But again, it's going to be a very exciting event, UPSLA and ICFP.
Thank you. Good point. Other questions? Yeah.
With Okay. Yeah, one question about with regard to publication. The plan is to still keep it informal, like, or we have proceedings for the publication from the submissions or accepted paper.
I don't know if we have a definite plan. We're open to community feedback on what is most helpful for building the field. Sorry, just typing this in for Emma. Okay, it is? I don't know.
Can you hear us, Emma? She might have muted it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think we have reached our natural closing point. Thank you all for a very interesting day.